That's my bitch. That's my bitch, bro. That's my bitch for real, bro. Fuck with you.
They say the most dangerous time in a toxic relationship is the moment you decide to leave. For 29-year-old Mershana Struggs, that moment came one sweltering summer afternoon in Houston. It began with a confrontation in a car. It ended with a desperate chase, gunshots echoing across an apartment complex, and a woman lying lifeless in the parking lot, just steps away from safety. But this story didn't start with violence. It started with ambition. With a young mother's determination to create a better life. With dreams built from scratch, nurtured in late nights and early mornings. She was a creator, a provider, and above all else, a mother trying to make it on her own. Until the man who claimed to love her decided that her success belonged to him. This is the tragic case of Mershana Struggs. And the man who couldn't stand to see her rise without him. Before we dive in, if you're new here, welcome to True Crime Watch HD. We uncover chilling real-life stories with the care, depth, and truth they deserve. If you're into immersive storytelling that respects victims and exposes the darkest corners of the human psyche, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We're just getting started. Let's begin where all tragedies like this one seem to start, not with the crime but with the quiet moments that came before it. The warning signs, the whispers, the slow unraveling. Mershana Struggs was born in 1994, in the modest but tightly knit community of Marrero, Louisiana. To those who knew her, she was Mermy, a radiant soul with a fierce work ethic and a heart bigger than her dreams. Her family loved her deeply. Friends described her as the kind of person who made you feel like you mattered just by being around her. She wasn't just present, she was purposeful. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood, Mershana never had it easy. But from an early age, she showed signs of independence that set her apart. Even at Higgins High School, where others were content to coast, she was always pushing, always dreaming of something more. She didn't want a handout, she wanted to build something she could be proud of. Something she could pass on to her child. And she did. Not long after high school, she had a baby with her then-boyfriend. And like so many young mothers, she found a new kind of strength in motherhood. Her child wasn't just her responsibility, it was her reason. The fire behind every late-night hustle. The anchor that kept her going when the storms came. But being a young, single mom is a mountain in itself. And as her relationship with the child's father broke down, financial stress mounted. Bills didn't care how hard she worked. Rent didn't wait for opportunity. So, she made a decision that would change everything. She left Louisiana. It wasn't easy, leaving behind the only place you've ever known rarely is. But Mershana believed that Houston, Texas, could be the fresh start she desperately needed. A bigger city. More chances. A new beginning. And at first it seemed like the right move. Mershana settled into her new surroundings and, after some initial struggles, found a way to leverage the digital economy to her advantage. She joined OnlyFans, an online platform where she could control her content, her hours, and her income. But this wasn't a reckless leap. She was strategic, setting boundaries, refusing in-person requests, and sticking strictly to digital content. At $35 a month per subscriber, she quickly began earning over $7,000 a month. Enough to provide for her child and begin sending money back to her family in Marrero. She had created something powerful: financial independence, control, freedom. And for a moment, it seemed like she had truly made it. But success, especially for women online, comes with shadows. And one of those shadows was about to walk straight into her life. His name was Nicholas Finley. To a stranger, Nicholas might have seemed like a decent guy. At 34, he wasn't flashy or famous. But he had a calm, grounded demeanor that made him easy to talk to. He listened. He asked about her dreams. He made her laugh. And after months of doing everything on her own, Nicholas offered something that felt rare: support. Or at least that's how it looked at first. Their relationship started like most do. Casual texts, movie nights, flirty banter. Friends noticed she smiled more when she talked about him. It seemed she had found someone who wanted to build something with her, not use her. But behind that charm, something darker was brewing. It started with simple questions. Where are you going? Who are you with? Why didn't you text me back sooner? At first she brushed it off. He cared. He was protective. She thought maybe this was just part of learning each other's rhythms. But then came the accusations. The guilt trips. The emotional manipulation. He began criticizing her content. Telling her what she should and shouldn't post. Making comments about her fans. Suggesting she was choosing strangers over him. Still, Mershana, fiercely loyal, deeply hopeful, tried to keep the peace. She thought if she could just show him how much she cared, he'd stop seeing her success as a threat. She was wrong. Nicholas soon asked her to move in. And that's when the isolation began. Friends saw her less and less. Her social media became less frequent. Neighbors started hearing arguments behind closed doors. And then came the first chilling demand. He told her he wanted a cut of her earnings. Not a suggestion. Not a request. A demand. He believed that because he was her boyfriend, he was entitled to the money she made. To her platform. To her power. When she refused, that's when the story turned fatal. When Mershana moved in with Nicholas, she may have believed it was the next step in a committed relationship. A sign of trust. Stability. A foundation for the family she hoped to build. But for Nicholas, it was something else entirely: access. Living under the same roof gave him 24/7 proximity to her life, her schedule, her finances, her work. And almost immediately, that proximity became possession. It started with small things. Subtle restrictions that didn't raise alarms at first. He'd make little comments about what she wore in her content. Tell her a real woman wouldn't post like that. Suggest that if she really respected herself or really loved him, she wouldn't be putting herself out there. It wasn't concern. It was control disguised as care. And Mershana, always trying to keep the peace, adjusted. She dialed back some posts, posted less frequently, tried to reassure him. But the more she gave, the more he took. Soon, Nicholas was dictating her content completely. Telling her what to post, when to post, monitoring her messages, accusing her of things she hadn't done, comparing himself to her subscribers, men he'd never met but resented deeply. And behind every restriction came an ultimatum. If you loved me, you'd stop. If you cared about this relationship, you'd let this go. It's me or them. Isolation crept in like smoke under a door. Slowly, invisibly, and then, suddenly, everything was different. Friends back home in Marrero heard from her less and less. Calls were shorter. Conversations filtered. She no longer shared the joys of motherhood with the same lightness. Her posts, once bold and joyful, became sporadic, muted. Her neighbors in the apartment complex began to notice too. One recalled, she used to smile at everyone. Now, she just looked tired. Still, no one outside their home truly knew what was happening inside it. Then one evening, Nicholas crossed a line that shifted everything. He told her he wanted a portion of her earnings. Not just to help out. Not as a conversation about bills or shared expenses. He wanted a cut, as if her income was a joint venture. As if her hard-earned money was somehow his property too. And when she said no, he didn't take it well. Mershana was stunned. She had already been paying for most of their shared expenses. She'd covered rent, groceries. Yes. She had even lent him money in the past, without asking for repayment. But now Nicholas wanted more. Not help. Not partnership. Ownership. And the reasoning? You wouldn't be making that money if you weren't with me. I deserve it for standing by you. You owe me. To anyone on the outside, those words would be a massive red flag. But when you're trapped in a web of emotional abuse, logic doesn't always penetrate the fog. Especially when the abuser is someone you've trusted. Still, Mershana didn't bend. She told him flatly, no. And in doing so, she unknowingly triggered the fuse on something far more dangerous. After that night, the tension in their home became unbearable. Nicholas, now emboldened in his entitlement, began to lash out more frequently. His manipulation became threats. His jealousy more visible. He was no longer just criticizing her, he was stalking her within her own life. Demanding passwords. Tracking her phone. Checking her social media activity. The fights grew louder. More intense. Neighbors started hearing them through the walls. One neighbor would later say, you could tell it was getting worse. It wasn't just arguments anymore, it sounded like fear. And in the middle of all this, was a little boy. A child who didn't understand what was happening, only that his mother had begun to cry more often. A child who saw the light in her eyes dim just a little more each day. Eventually, Mershana made a decision. She would leave. It wasn't rash. It wasn't dramatic. It was a quiet, courageous choice made by a woman who finally understood the danger she was in. She began making plans. Quietly exploring new housing. Reaching out to friends. Putting away a little money, separate from her main accounts, so that when the time came she could disappear without warning. But Nicholas was watching. He could sense the distance, the shift, the way she no longer responded to his tantrums, the way she packed her bags with a little too much care. And the more control he felt slipping away, the more dangerous he became. In the days leading up to July 19th, things reached a boiling point. Nicholas had been pulled over while driving Mershana's car. Frustrated and angry, he demanded she bring him the insurance card. She agreed, but only to avoid another fight. And so, on that day she returned to the apartment complex with a friend, unaware that Nicholas was already waiting for her. What happened next wasn't a heated argument. It wasn't a scuffle. It was something colder, sharper. He was sitting in her car. She stepped out. He confronted her. And then, shots rang out. But that was just the beginning. July 19, 2024, began like any other scorching summer day in Houston. The sun beat down mercilessly, and the air was thick with humidity. But for Mershana, this day carried the weight of impending change. She had been meticulously planning to leave Nicholas, seeking a safer environment for herself and her child. That morning, Nicholas had been pulled over while driving Mershana's car. Frustrated and agitated, he demanded that she bring him the insurance card. Mershana, accompanied by a friend, agreed, hoping to avoid another confrontation. Upon returning to their apartment complex, they found Nicholas already there, sitting in her car. The atmosphere was tense, a palpable sense of unease hanging in the air. As Mershana approached, Nicholas confronted her. The argument escalated rapidly, voices rising, drawing the attention of neighbors. Among them was Shani Drury, who would later recount the events to investigators. According to Drury, Nicholas accused Mershana of betrayal, his words laced with anger and resentment. The situation deteriorated quickly, and suddenly gunshots rang out. Drury, fearing for her own safety, retreated into her apartment, hiding in the bathroom as the terrifying events unfolded. She later recalled, "I just had my hands over my head and it was so loud. I thought he was coming in the house because he kept saying he was going to kill everybody in the house. He was going to kill us for helping her." Despite being wounded, Mershana's instinct for survival kicked in. She managed to break free and ran, desperately seeking refuge. She attempted to get into a neighbor's truck, but Nicholas pursued her relentlessly. Drury recounted, "She made it into my truck, I guess, and he shot her 4 or 5 more times over there, and then she managed to make it over here at that point, and he shot her like 8 more times." Mershana's strength and determination were evident as she fought to escape, but her injuries were too severe. She collapsed in the parking lot, just steps away from safety. Nicholas, consumed by rage, stood over Mershana's fallen body. Witnesses reported that he unloaded multiple shots into her, showing no mercy. The sound of gunfire echoed through the complex, a chilling reminder of the violence that had just occurred. Sheriff Ed Gonzalez later stated that intimate partner violence was a significant issue in the area, accounting for about 35% of all murders in unincorporated Harris County that year. He emphasized the importance of recognizing the signs of abuse and taking action against violence. Following the shooting, Nicholas fled the scene, taking Mershana's purse and vehicle. The Harris County Sheriff's Office launched an immediate manhunt, utilizing all available resources to apprehend him. The community was left in shock. Neighbors who had witnessed the incident were traumatized, struggling to process the brutality they had observed. The apartment complex, once a place of relative quiet, was now a crime scene, marked by police tape and flashing lights. It wasn't long before deputies located Nicholas. He was arrested without incident and charged with capital murder. Court records indicate that he was denied bond, ensuring he remained in custody as the legal process unfolded. The tragic death of Mershana Struggs sent ripples through the community. Vigils were held in her honor, with friends, family, and neighbors gathering to mourn the loss of a vibrant young woman and mother. Her family from Marrero, Louisiana, traveled to Houston, grappling with the sudden and violent loss of their loved one. Advocacy groups highlighted this incident as a stark reminder of the dangers associated with intimate partner violence. The Houston Area Women's Center reported an increase in calls, as individuals sought assistance and guidance on how to navigate abusive relationships. As the legal proceedings began, prosecutors prepared to present a case that underscored the premeditated nature of the crime. The evidence was compelling. Eyewitness accounts, surveillance footage, and a history of escalating abuse and control. Nicholas's defense team faced an uphill battle, given the overwhelming evidence against him. The charge of capital murder in Texas carries severe penalties, including the possibility of the death penalty. In the wake of the tragedy, the community sought ways to heal and support one another. Counseling services were offered to residents of the apartment complex, many of whom were struggling with the trauma of witnessing such a violent act. Local organizations collaborated to raise awareness about domestic violence, emphasizing the importance of early intervention and support for those in abusive relationships. Educational programs were implemented, aiming to equip individuals with the tools and knowledge to recognize and address signs of abuse. Amid the legal proceedings and community initiatives, the focus remained on honoring Mershana's memory. Her family described her as a loving mother, a dedicated daughter, and a resilient individual who sought to create a better life for herself and her child. Her story became a catalyst for change, inspiring others to speak out against domestic violence and support those affected by it. While her life was tragically cut short, her legacy sparked conversations and actions aimed at preventing similar tragedies in the future. As we approach the conclusion of this harrowing tale, questions linger. How did the legal system respond to such a heinous act? What measures have been implemented to protect others from similar fates? And how can communities come together to support victims and prevent domestic violence? The days following Mershana's murder were a blur of disbelief, grief, and chaos for her family. News of her death traveled quickly from Houston to her hometown of Marrero, Louisiana. Her loved ones, who had once cheered her on for chasing her dreams, were now left to make arrangements for her cremation instead of her homecoming. Her mother was inconsolable. Friends posted tributes online, struggling to make sense of the loss. And strangers, many of whom had never met Mershana but followed her journey on social media, were devastated by the senselessness of it all. At the apartment complex, silence replaced the echoes of gunfire. But the trauma lingered. Neighbors replayed those terrifying moments again and again, unable to shake the image of a woman running for her life, only to be hunted down in daylight. Many questioned what they could have done differently. Some wondered if earlier signs of abuse had been missed. Others just felt helpless. But amid the pain, something began to happen. People started speaking up. The story gained traction online. True crime enthusiasts, survivors of abuse, and advocates across the country began sharing Mershana's name. They told her story, not as just another headline, but as a symbol of what too many women endure behind closed doors. Her life and her death sparked conversations that went far beyond Houston. The Houston Area Women's Center reported a noticeable spike in calls following the incident. Survivors were seeking help. Some were asking how to leave. Others simply wanted to talk. What had happened to Mershana was terrifying, but it also gave others the courage to say, "That could have been me, and I need out." Sheriff Ed Gonzalez used the moment to issue a public statement. Love shouldn't hurt. It's important to recognize the signs of abuse and take action against violence against women. Intimate partner violence is a national epidemic, and here in unincorporated Harris County, it accounts for over 35% of all murders this year alone. That statistic hit hard. 35%. That means 1 in every 3 murder victims in that region lost their life at the hands of someone who once claimed to love them. Meanwhile, back at the Harris County Jail, Nicholas Finley sat in a cell, charged with capital murder. He had been apprehended just hours after fleeing the scene, still in possession of Mershana's car and purse. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Witnesses placed him at the scene. Surveillance footage confirmed the sequence of events. And the medical examiner's report left no room for ambiguity. Multiple close-range gunshot wounds. No signs of a struggle. Just execution. The state moved quickly to pursue justice. With a capital murder charge, Finley faced the most serious of consequences. Either life in prison without the possibility of parole or the death penalty. At the preliminary hearings, prosecutors painted a clear picture. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was calculated. It was possessive. It was preventable. They laid out the pattern of control. The financial manipulation. The emotional abuse. They showed how Nicholas had isolated Mershana, inserted himself into her financial life, and then lashed out when she tried to reclaim her freedom. But it was what they didn't find that said just as much. No signs of forced entry. No evidence that she fought back. Because by the time she ran, she already knew, this wasn't just another argument. This was a man who had made up his mind. Inside the courtroom, family members sat in silent agony. Her mother clutched a folded photo. Her sister wept through most of the proceedings. At one point, a cousin had to be escorted out after a breakdown during testimony. On the other side of the room, Nicholas Finley remained mostly emotionless, occasionally scribbling notes, occasionally glancing toward the jury. But not once, according to several reporters, did he look at Mershana's family. There were no apologies, no explanations, just silence. The defense tried to argue diminished capacity, stress, mental instability, but the facts told a different story. He had waited in her car. He had pulled the trigger multiple times. He had chased her down and continued shooting even as she collapsed. Premeditation was written all over it. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before returning with a verdict: guilty of capital murder. The sentence? Life in prison without the possibility of parole. In Texas, that meant no second chances. No appeals for parole boards. No release date. Nicholas Finley would spend the rest of his life behind bars. For some in the courtroom, it was a relief. Justice had been served. But for Mershana's family, the verdict was only a small piece of closure. No punishment could bring her back. No sentence could fill the space she once occupied in their lives. After the trial, her family set out to honor her memory. They launched awareness campaigns about intimate partner violence. They spoke at community events. Her story was featured in educational materials and workshops. Balloons were released in her honor at vigils in both Houston and Marrero. One of the most emotional moments came during a candlelight vigil held at the site where she died. Her young son, too young to understand the full gravity of what had happened, released a purple balloon and whispered, "Bye, Mommy." It was a moment that left everyone in tears. But it was also a reminder. This story isn't just about the violence that ended her life. It's about the brilliance of who she was. A mother, a daughter, a fighter. A woman who tried to escape, and whose courage lit a fire in communities far beyond the one she called home. So what do we take from this? Mershana Struggs did everything right. She worked hard. She left. She made plans. She reached out. And still, she became a victim of something that happens far too often and is spoken about far too little. If you or someone you know is in a relationship that feels unsafe, please know, you are not alone. Resources are available. Your safety matters. Your life matters. And to our audience, this is where we need you. If this story moved you, if it made you pause, or even if it made you angry, talk about it. Share this video. Comment below. Start the conversations that push back against silence. What signs have you seen go unnoticed in someone you know? What more could society be doing to protect people like Mershana? Let's make sure her story isn't forgotten. Because remembering her could save someone else. Thank you for watching True Crime Watch HD. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and remember, behind every headline is a human life.